Hey, I'm Alan Childress. I'm a Tulane law professor who also teaches notary classes at night with on Zoom with my wife Michelle. I pointed in the direction because she's over there working. Um, this is a short-ish YouTube on exam day tips because a lot of you are taking the exam either next week or you might get pushed off until June 7th with their overflow date. You'll find out probably tonight or this afternoon or Monday at the latest which date and location you're assigned to. And so I'm hoping that these tips will make that exam day experience more comfortable. Now, what I'm about to say technically only applies to the May and June exams. We don't know yet what the actual process will be after that. So they're likely to have another exam or two at the end of the year of 2025, but they may start doing it on computer instead of using Scantrons. Now, most of what I say today would still apply, but things like bringing number two pencils and all that would not apply anymore. All right, so the first thing is the check-in process. You have to have a physical ID. It's going to have to be a passport or driver's license, state-issued ID, a Louisiana state-issued ID, probably because you've already asserted that you are a domiciliary of Louisiana. But in any event, um, if you don't have a physical ID, this is the week to get it. Might be a good week to also just get it as a real ID. You need it to match up with your the name that you submitted to the Secretary of State for applying for this exam. And if they don't match up because of marriage or otherwise, contact the Secretary of State's Notary Division on Monday or Tuesday and see how you can reconcile that. It may be that they could easily change the name you're using for the exam into the one that matches your state ID. And so whatever solution that they can come up with to make sure that you're not turned away at the door will be fine. I did want to mention that they don't accept, oddly enough, uh, the virtual ID LA wallet that's on your phone. And in fact, you probably really don't want to take your phone at all into the exam room for the reasons I'm about to talk about. So make sure that you have that as a physical ID. Another thing you need is a printed copy of the admission ticket, which could be the email they send you soon or an attachment to the email that they send you, but make sure you have that. They won't accept that on your phone or an image of it. They want the physically printed ticket. They're very old school. Um, I suggest you print out 2 or 3 copies of it and stick one in your trunk of your car, stick one in your purse or wallet, fold it up, stick one in the book that you'll be taking in there. In case you forget it, you've got redundancy and protection. I've heard too many stories of former students or people in the Facebook groups who tell me that they were on their way to the exam and they realized they didn't have the admission ticket and they turned back and either didn't make it in time or otherwise disqualified themselves. So it's just too important for you to leave to one copy that you may not be able to find the morning of the exam. The place you go for this check-in process is either Hines Hall at LSU Baton Rouge or a location in LSU Alexandria that I don't know the name of, but that will be on your admission tickets. Now, sometimes with Alexandria, they change at the last minute, and your admission ticket says a different place than some sign on campus that redirects you. So be aware that you need to plan a little bit of extra time in case the place you think you're going to is different from the one that they actually administer the test in. Now, for Hines Hall in Baton Rouge, it's near the clock tower, the Memorial Clock Tower, the main library. It's kind of tucked behind that in a quad area. So it's not like on the street you can see a sign that says Hines Hall. But what I've always said is that if you park anywhere near the clock tower and just watch the line of the Walking Dead zombies going towards a facility, you're just following along with everybody else who's taking the exam that day. Now, it is graduation on the campus that day, so you want to get there a little bit earlier than you otherwise would to make sure you can get a parking space. Parking is free, and there's plenty of parking around there, but I worry about how graduation might affect that. My suspicion is it won't affect it that much in that graduation is at PMAC, However, there are going to be a lot of people who are driving around, getting there early to take pictures or to get a parking space. And so you want to get there early enough that you avoid that issue on May 17th. Probably much less of an issue on June 7th. You need to bring in your study guide, but it's got to be the 2025 study guide, the one with the gray cover, and no other book. Uh, so if you want to turn the study guide into a more usable resource, then, for example, my CitePiece book tells you how to annotate it and add an index to it and cross references that will make it a better resource. And there's still time to get that book, especially as an ebook, downloaded from Amazon or Apple Books app, if you needed to index your book and have it prepared for that. So that's the only book you can take in, really the only resource you can take in. I do suggest that you double check the rules on tabbing if you use tabbing at all. I happen to prefer indexing, but if you needed to tab it or you feel comfortable tabbing it, make sure that the tabs you use comply with the image that they show on the Secretary of State's website. You have to kind of click a link to see their images of their acceptable tabs. And when they say clear, that also includes clear but colored. They mean transparent. They don't mean clear, meaning only non-colored, as you might think. Those permanent type tabs are acceptable, but repositional tabs, even if they say on the package permanent tabs, are not acceptable. So make sure you get the exact right kind if you're going to use tabs at all. And there are also rules on the limit of the number of tabs you can use per page, only one per page, the size of the tabs. And you might want to consider, if you're going to use tabs at all, to put them at the top of the study guide, not along the edges, so that you can still flip through the book very easily and the tabs don't get in the way of that. Anyway, that's the study guide. The only other thing you really can take in there, that you need to take in there, are number 2 pencils, and they do want you to bring wooden pencils. They don't say it in the Secretary of State's guide, but every time you call them and ask, can I bring in a mechanical pencil, somebody says no. I don't think they would kick you out for that, since it's not advertised that you aren't supposed to bring a mechanical pencil. My belief is that they only say that to make sure that it's a number 2 lead, that the Scantron reads well. But if the only thing you really can use is a mechanical pencil, I don't think that's a problem. But bring along some number 2 pencils, sharp, ready to go, with clean erasers on them, to be able to use the day of the exam. Then I recommend you don't bring anything else in. Bringing in a phone, even that's turned off, runs the risk that an Amber Alert or something will turn the phone back on, and or that somebody else has an ability to turn on your phone remotely. You just don't want it to sound up during the exam. You can't bring a watch. They used to allow analog watches, but I don't think they allow that anymore. Your instruction sheet that you'll get in your admission email will give you the details of what they do and do not allow. But I'm pretty sure they don't want you to bring a watch anymore, which means that you probably want to find a seat, if they allow you to choose a seat, near one of the bigger clocks that they have on the wall, because they're not very consistent about calling 1 hour to go, half hour to go, 15 minutes to go. They sometimes do that, but they do less and less of that now that they start people at different staggered times. So you can't count on them to do that. You have to keep track of time. And the only way to do that is with a clock on the wall, which means you might want to bring a second pair of glasses if you're using reading glasses to take the exam, but you have a different set of glasses to see 15 feet away, 20 feet away. You should bring those too and be able to use those. So that's really the only 2 things you should bring in. I think bringing a phone in is just a risk that doesn't have any upside, and I would just leave it in the car. So let's then talk about highlighters. Well, you could bring in highlighters or a pen if you wanted to, like, circle in the question booklet something to come back to or highlight it. But the reason I don't really recommend a highlighter is it takes more time than just circling something or putting a star next to it. But also, you probably used highlighters as a way to highlight the actual study guide along the way. And I think you'll be tempted to keep doing that. But they have an unwritten rule that they've actually kicked out people for, even though it's not mentioned as far as I can see on the Secretary of State's website, that you cannot write into the study guide that during the exam. And you've been doing that for months now, and your habit is to highlight or write into it, make notes. And you may think during the exam, you see something that you realize, oh, I'm going to come back to that, or that's an important point to answer a question that I saw earlier. So I'm just going to circle it now. That technically is a violation of their proctoring rules, and they can kick you out for that. And my students tell me that they've seen people kicked out for writing in the study guide. So absolutely don't put yourself in the position where they could enforce this rule on you, and there's little appeal or recourse they can do. That they say, oh, well, take the exam again next time. That's no help to you. So my strong recommendation is to leave the highlighters in the car as well, only because I think if you used highlighters, you had the habit of using them just to annotate the study guide, and you just don't want to do that. I would apportion about 5 minutes per question. And if you feel yourself, you can't be looking at a watch, they don't allow that, or constantly looking at the clock. But I think you should get a feel for what about 5 minutes is. And if you haven't answered the question in 4 or 5 minutes, just fill in a dot and move on. Your best answer and move on. It doesn't do you any good to spend 10 minutes on a question and run out of time for several other questions towards the end of the exam. And as I'll mention in a minute, there's enough margin for error that one question won't be the win or lose thing, even though it feels like it. If you get a 68 or 69, oh, that's the one question that sunk me. And I'd say, no, those are the 12 questions that sunk you, and that wasn't the one that you should obsess about or focus on. So if you get a really difficult question that involves for example, a lot of geometry on a property description question, or an incredibly complicated scenario where no matter that you've spent 4 minutes reading the scenario and trying to figure it out, you don't have an answer for it, I say just answer it and move on. Maybe if you have time to go back and think about it some more. Uh, a good rule of thumb, though, of everybody who takes multiple choice exams is go with your first answer. And I'm going to annotate that and say, well, don't have the habit of taking what you think is the right answer and then changing it a lot. I think that's going to lose points more than it gets. But I'm going to say, well, wait, if there's a good reason why you're changing it, you reread the question and realized you got Joe and John mixed up, then change it. If you find something in the study guide, even with a different question, that makes you realize that you answered question 4 wrong, then go back to question 4 and fix it. So don't have some absolute rule that you impose upon yourself that once you've answered it, you will never look at it again. But I also don't think you should spend the last 15 minutes changing a lot of answers, overthinking a lot of questions. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what the best answer is that they're looking for. But I did want to mention kind of the ending of the process is that when you have about 8 minutes left to go, use that time to quickly finish up, meaning don't leave any dots undotted. You're not punished for a wrong answer. So don't put yourself in the position where you've left 3 questions blank, or even worse, started filling them in after they call time, in which case they will dismiss you, even though you've just filled in 1 dot after time is called. They consider that cheating, they'll dismiss you, they'll make a big deal out of that. So don't be in that situation. So make sure that with 5 minutes to go, that you're filling in the last few dots, and just make sure that you've answered every question, even with just C, if that's all you can do for the last minute. However, you don't want to go over the time, as I just mentioned, and you don't want to get in the habit of answering all the questions in the question booklet and then saying, oh, with 8 minutes to go, I will translate that over to the Scantron sheet. I've had too many students over the last 35 years of my teaching who wound up with an almost failed exam because they used that strategy and didn't realize how much time it takes to take the questions and put them onto a Scantron, to take the answers that they circle in a book and put them onto the Scantron. Or they miscalculated the time and thought there was a half hour left when in fact time is just being called, and they filled out none of the Scantron sheet. You can't be in that situation. Fill it out as you go. And of course, make sure every once in a while you double check that you're on the right number, that question 7 is being asked. I'm filling in the dot for question 7 on the Scantron. but don't wait till the last minute to do it all. That's just a huge mistake. We're gonna end when time is called. If you finish 15 minutes early or earlier, you're allowed to check out and leave the room early. But within that 15-minute window, they ask you to stay there and wait till time is called and check out with everybody. Now, I don't think you should be finishing up 15 minutes early. That's, to me, 15 minutes of time that you could go back to those 3 questions that you found very hard and double check them, and keep using the study guide as much as possible to answer questions, to find answers in the book, even if all you have is 15 minutes to reconfirm what you think were some easy questions. And you just go back in the study guide to find where that was stated and realize that, yes, you're right, and you'll stick with it. Or the next paragraph talks about an exception that you forgot about. And so the answer you thought was right and was a good answer is not the best answer, because they're really getting into an exception that the scenario raises. So be aware of that possibility. And if you have extra time, kind of go back and double check what you think are the easy ones. Not usually there are some easy ones. There are some straightforward ones. You don't want to overthink those. But at the same time, if they use one that's too easy, maybe you look in the study guide. And one I've tripped up students over the years with a sample question is a question that comes down to whether a notary has to be a registered voter in Louisiana. And everybody says yes, because almost everybody taking the exam has to be a registered voter and remembers that from Chapter 7 in the study guide, and remembers that from their application to qualify, where they were asked that. But a Louisiana notary does not have to be one if they're not a U.S. citizen. And so there's an exception to that for non-U.S. citizens. And if the question doesn't specify, and it just says, is a notary required to be a registered voter? The answer is not necessarily. Or no, they're not. A notary is not necessarily required to be one. So again, you don't want to put yourself in the question so much that you over-identify with it and say, well, I had to be one, therefore a notary has to be one. You will get your results in 4 to 7 weeks by email from the LSU Office of Testing and Education Services, probably the same email that you get the email today from. And if that went to spam, or today or Monday, when you get the notice of and your admission ticket, if that went to spam, then you definitely want to put LSU Otis on your accepted mail list so that you'll get your results. Technically, a 75% right passes. That's what they put on the website. But for years, they've often accepted 70% as the passing score. So realistically, if you get 41, 42 right of 55 questions, and they'll probably have about 55 questions, or if they have 70 questions, then you'd need to get around 53 or 52 right. Then your percentage being around 70% should be a passing score. We do have a YouTube. If you do find out you're passed, it's great. That'd be great news. We have a YouTube on getting your commission. So it has the basic information on what you file with the Secretary of State and how to save money doing that, and some resources available for starting practice. So look on the same YouTube channel for getting your commission, or how to I passed, and that. We also have a video on our website, schoolofnotary.com, that's just past that stage. So once you have your commission and you're looking for early practice tips, we have one called I Passed Now Watch, which goes into kind of like the real life things you need to know to start practice, that are just tips on that they didn't teach you in the study guide necessarily. So they're not, I wouldn't watch that if haven't passed the exam yet or taken the exam yet, because some of the answers would be different from the exam answer, and you want to give the exam answer from the study guide for the day of the exam. But someday you might be more interested in how this works out in real practice, when somebody has signed the form in the wrong place or signed it before they've come in, and how to deal with difficult clients, where to get forms, where to get resources. All of these are things that we talk about in our webinar called I Passed Now Live. And I think it's like $35 or $39. It's not that expensive for a 3-hour introduction to the practice. So I hope you find out you passed. Now I am going to spend a few minutes, if you don't mind, talking about the best answer. Now, I think the main reason they say at the top of the page of the exam, probably the top of every page, provide the best answer only, is one, to remind you that you can't fill in more than one dot. That will disqualify that question if you try to do that, or if you don't erase the bad one uh, enough that it thinks that are too bad. Don't do it so much you tear the Scantron sheet, but you do want to at least get rid of a bad answer and fill in your right answer so they don't think you have two answers. But I think the main reason they do that is just CYA, which is the answer that they think is the best, is probably just the right answer, that the other 3 or 4 answers they give are wrong for some technical reason. But they are at least allowing for the possibility that there are two right answers and one that's best. I don't think they design most questions intentionally to do that. It'll feel that way when you're in the exam because you'll think there's two answers that you think are right. But very often the reason one answer is wrong is some technical picky reason that makes it actually wrong. But if you do get in a situation where you have two answers that you think are pretty good and you have to choose between them, then here's some rules of thumb for that. One answer might be conditional, like it's right only if, or it's right some of the time. Whereas another answer is absolutely right, or always right, or non conditionally right. Then choose the unconditionally correct one. Sometimes an answer is literally correct, and another answer is correct for its purpose or for what it's trying to accomplish, but uses the wrong phrase or is literally wrong. And they are very literal on this exam. Sometimes an answer is actually a correct statement, but it doesn't have anything to do with the scenario. And so they'll say, yes, because, but that because reason isn't at all the reason to solve the problem in the scenario. So sometimes they'll give a statement that in the abstract is a perfectly correct statement of the rule, but it doesn't solve the problem that the scenario presents. And there's another answer that does. Then the other answer is the best answer, not the one that is, I would say, accurate but irrelevant, or accurate but not that useful to solve the specific concern that the question is about. Occasionally, they will have an answer that's also more complete. So there'll be one answer B will be a correct statement, but answer C will be that statement and a few other words that make it more complete. Now, that isn't always true. Those few other words might make it a wrong answer. They may qualify it in a way that the rule isn't, like or an authentic act, when the or unauthentic act part makes the answer wrong. But a lot of times there's one answer that's decent or in the ballpark, but incomplete, and another one that's complete. Anyway, those are my exam day tips. I hope that's useful to you. I think most of them will still be applicable when they eventually go to an on-screen computer-only testing, because it still will have scenarios and answer choices, and you'll be filling in a dot. You'll just be filling it in on the screen rather than on a Scantron. So it won't change that dramatically in that sense. So good luck on the exam, and let me know if in comments whether some of these tips work out or if you have other tips. Oh, I should have said this much earlier. This is maybe one of the most important rules, and it has nothing to do with cheating or their mechanical rules. It's bring a sweatshirt, sweater, or jacket into the exam room, because the exam rooms are notoriously cold. I mean, freezing cold to the point where your hands are shaking and you have trouble filling out the Scantron. And so I wish I'd said that first, because I don't think people intuit that, and they don't say anything about that in the study guide, of course. But yeah, take in a sweatshirt, even if it's just wrapped around your waist and you never use it. So good luck on this. Bye, guys.